for the public sector when things get a little challenging, shall I say. And I think definitely in the last 12 months and going forward, times have been even more challenging than maybe they have previously. And sometimes there's a reflex or a reaction. Let's be innovative as though you can flip the switch. And I would contend that it's not automatic. It's really a skill set, it's a muscle, and it's a mindset. And what I want to share with you today is an approach about think outside the building. I was just trying to be a little clever to catch people's attention instead of, think outside the box. Literally, many of you are outside your normal building, your city hall, your county offices, wherever you typically reported to. Maybe you're working from home or what have you. So it's not that big of a reach now to really envision how you're viewing your role. And what I want to spend some time on today is really helping you raise your self-awareness about what are you doing, regardless of your stage of your career. I think it's very helpful, especially right now. People are hungry for some good content. I'm definitely going to try to meet or exceed that expectation for you as a professional. And then also how you can apply that to your organization. And that's what I'm also going to share with you today. What are some different tools, tips, and techniques that you can use immediately in the spirit of Mejorando to help your organization get better all the time? Because you're only limited by your imagination and what you can succeed. So let's get going. So let me start off with a question. Are you learning as fast as the world is changing? Some people still rely on the status quo, even when it's no longer a viable option. And my focus today is to help you transition, for some to transform from the status quo to the status quo. So think about that word learning. In fact, let me offer this suggestion. In your budget where you have that line item that says training, why don't you try to cross that out? Don't tell finance or the budget people. Just try to do it. And instead of the word training, put in the word learning, because training is an expense and learning is an investment. And one of the first things in an agency's budget that gets reduced when budgets get tight is training, as though it's a luxury. Now think about that, though, for yourself and for your staff, for members of your organization, that really what we're asking people to do right now, and I think we always are, is to learn better, learn more sooner, faster. Even if you don't want to get promoted, to stay as a fully qualified incumbent, you have to try to do new things. How's your organization trying to equip people in your organization with tomorrow's skills today? Think about what you are. How are you building career insurance? Something for you to think about. Some people are going to come out as we arrive at the next normal, which is arriving every day. They're going to come out more qualified, more capable, more energized. Some people aren't. Control what you can. It's a personal choice. So I'm asking you, and I applaud you for taking time again out of your schedule to spend some time with me today to help accelerate your learning. I'm a flashlight in a mirror. I tell my clients that, and I'm trying to shed light on these topics and hold a mirror up and say, let me share with you a few thoughts, and ask you to share with yourself a few thoughts to raise your self-awareness. Now, for this webinar, I tried something different, and thank you, Julian, for helping me do this. I put together a little bit of pre-webinar preparation. You should have received an email from Julian on my behalf in the last week or so. Hopefully you forwarded this to those people that were going to be attending the webinar. But if not, it's okay. But these are what I call learning lubricants. And I sent this in the email, so hopefully you're able to do this. Something for you to think about, not just for today's webinar, but I would offer you going forward, anytime you're trying to position your mind that it's going to be receptive to new information. Because sometimes in this day and age where we're so busy and you're behind on this and you're trying to catch up with that, it's easy to look for information that simply reaffirms your point of view. What I'm trying to do today is to open up your mind and try to navigate a journey to share with you some new ways of looking at it. So these are some of the learning lubricants I asked you to do. First, hopefully you have an object with you that you draw positive emotional energy from, such as a photo or a memento that holds special meaning to you. Something that you can draw that emotional energy from, gives you a source of strength. Two, hopefully you put together a playlist of songs to help you transition from your work responsibilities to open up your senses to the webinar. Maybe you did that right before we came on. There was some wonderful classical music. Hope you got a chance to listen to that. Music is like poetry in song, as we know. So how are you trying to lubricate your mind through music? Third, maybe you can do this later today or tomorrow. Write down the 10 best ideas you've ever had. Whether or not they were successful, that's unimportant. I'm a huge believer, as those of you that know me and have attended webinars are my clients, and I appreciate my clients that have joined us today. I'm a huge believer in writing things down, beyond an email, a memo, a report, a text, but things where you get a chance to really reflect and capture your best thoughts. Number four, for you to identify which boxes or lenses you're using now that need to be either seriously modified or totally discarded. So in order to think outside the building, you have to sort of apply a new lens. So today what I'm going to try to share with you is not just a magnifying glass, but maybe a pair of binoculars, maybe a kaleidoscope, maybe a telescope. Because if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And in order to think outside the building, you have to revisit your own assumptions and how you analyze information. So we're going to dig pretty deep into that today and help you examine your own assumptions. Number 5, what do you want to learn both from the webinar and overall this year? I think that's, by the way, that's a wonderful question to ask applicants for a job interview, internal or external. Ask people, what did they learn last year? I'll come back to that a little bit later. And then number 6, I hope that you have your ideas notebook that you can jot down your responses to the various questions I'll be asking, along with recording your own notes. Your ideas notebook, your leadership playbook. I hope that you're keeping something handy, whether it's typed on your computer or your tablet or your phone, or even maybe you have a journal, you write things down, the old pencil and paper or pen and paper, but somewhere where you're capturing information for your own edification. Maybe it's a chance to reflect, so you journal. It's wonderful that when we do that, we write things down. It gives us a chance to kind of examine our own thoughts from different lenses. So those are the learning lubricants. I hope you had fun doing these. If you didn't, don't worry. We're still going to help you sort of climb that ladder to move on to those next steps. But I hope that you reference these going forward. And anytime you're going to be in a space where you really want to open up all your senses and learn as much as you can, that whole notion of being a sponge. So here we go. This are broken eggshells. Now think about this for a moment. I've affectionately referred to the innovation paradox that I've developed. It's the challenge in government at all levels is, let's be innovative. Let's just make sure it works. We want to guarantee every time. We want it perfect, polished, and packaged. We want predictable outcomes. Now step back for a moment. Government agencies are designed as democratic institutions responsible for delivering services in an equitable manner. Fair enough? However, the delivery of those services, the design of those services, is not necessarily based on the notion of egalitarianism. I'm really digging deep here. When you think about innovation, the notion is you're going to have to be willing to experiment, to take smart risk-taking. Raise your hand if any of you work with a person where it's never a good day for a new idea. And if they're in the room, don't look at them. Anyway, you realize I can't see you raising your hand, but sometimes people are quick to judge. They're quick to dismiss. They're quick to discard. We tried that once. It didn't work here. Oh my gosh, these people are energy vampires, just sucking the life out of the workplace. Council won't let us. The board won't let us. The union won't let us. There's always a convenient out, like an escape hatch. Because people are so concerned with making mistakes. Hey, I'll give you, mistakes are bad, but what's worse is a culture that doesn't tolerate them. And a great way not to make mistakes is don't try anything new. So part of what I encourage you to think about, what you're advocating for, about taking smart risk. And here's a word, and what you'll find in this, if this is the first webinar you attended that I've presented, you'll find that I'm a big word person. I mean, I just have this fascination with words because we derive meanings from words, then we act in accordance with what we think those words mean. So I think one word we need to sort of jettison from the vocabulary in the workplace is failure. None of you arrive at work, either in your kitchen or your office, and neither do members of your staff, wanting to fail. Just think of that word, failure. I think that drops like an emotional depth charge in the workplace culture. And by the way, you only get to make so many failures before you're marginalized. How about if we use the word mistakes? Mistakes are part of learning. All of us are making mistakes every day, not sometimes intentionally, sometimes inadvertently. But I want you to think about that in the notion of innovation, being willing to accept that mistakes are going to be made in the process of making progress. But if the culture sort of advocates that no mistakes are tolerated, what's a great way to suppress innovation? Punish mistakes. People have very long memories in the workplace. You all know that. They can tell you why something happened 2 years ago. They got lit up at a council meeting or a board meeting. That chokes innovation. We'll talk about the role of elected officials a little bit later, but I'm just asking you to reflect on. How are you? What are you advocating for? How are you modeling the behavior where it's okay for people to take smart risks, not reckless, thoughtful and prudent? So on that notion, think of innovation as a verb, not a noun. Now let me ask you, do you have a job or a role? A job is about task. A role is about responsibility. So I'm going to challenge each and every one of you. We had over 68 people, agencies register for today's webinar. So thank you so much. People from all over the country at all different levels of government, which is wonderful. But I'm going to challenge each one of you. Well, sometime today or the next few days, go find your job description and you find the word innovation somewhere in it and you email it to me. Patrick at gettingbetterallthetime.com. Find it. Find innovation anywhere in a policy manual. Find any innovation anywhere in an ordinance, in a procedure, anywhere, a job description, a performance appraisal. I'll come back to that later. I worry when organizations mandate innovation. Now we've killed it. We've made it programmatic. And I think it needs to be more of a principle. But I'm asking you, do you have a job or a role? And when we look at it through the lens of your role as responsibilities, I would contend that each and every one of you and everyone in your organization is responsible for delivering high quality customer service every day to residents and businesses within your jurisdiction, regardless of your capacity. By the way, I think each and every one of you and all of your employees are all community builders, regardless of your level of government. But think about where innovation comes into that play, into that space, about your role. Now, when you look at your organization, these are pictures of different city halls and sort of different intentions and people working together. And I wanted to just share some pictures with you, just to show off that I know how to insert pictures in a PowerPoint. I'm kidding. But think about how your organization and how it defines itself. Does it define itself, like I said a few moments ago, simply as a democratic institution? How about if you define your organization as a set of capabilities? How about if you define yourself as a set of competencies? Think about how you define yourself, because I would offer that how your organization defines itself often leads it to those decisions that sort of are a replication of the past to build the future. And government is notorious for resynthesizing the past to build the future. I hope that you've all had a chance to read the series of articles I wrote for public management over the last year. Every quarter in 2020, I tackled "We've always done it that way" is over. What's next? Last February, I wrote a piece about culture change. Last May, it was about modernizing your talent management. In August, it was reimagining your community. And in December, it was innovating your future. And here's a little teaser. In April, it'll be your innovation fitness plan. And those of you that are attending today are going to get a preview, an exclusive look at what that innovation fitness plan looks like. But my point here is about that "we've always done it that way" is over. What's next? What I was trying to emphasize in my pieces was trying to challenge the assumption that if the only thing you do is what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And I think we all realize that's not good enough. Government as usual is over. So how do you define yourself individually as a professional? And how does the organization define itself? And I would ask you, if you have these in place, to look at your organizational values. Couple the values together. What does that do for the organization? Remember, we derive meaning and belief from our values. It affects our behavior and choices, or it should. We do that individually, and we should be doing that organizationally. And one area of my business practice over the last year has had an uptick, is working with elected and appointed officials and workforce members in revising and refreshing and embedding their organizational values. If anything, I think we are all seeing that values are instrumental in making choices. But I'm just asking you in your organization, how do you define yourself beyond a democratic institution? One area that I've said for years, because of the work I've done around talent management, succession planning, you should define yourself as an employer. You have to compete for talent. For some people in your agency, that's a real mindset shift. Say that 3 times, mindset shift. It can be challenging when people start to look through a different lens. So I hope that you reflect on that. Now I'm going to ask you to do something. Hopefully you have pencil and paper, or pen or paper, or tablet, something to write down. I'm going to ask you to describe your organization without using 6 key words: government, citizen, service, employee, community, and budget. Jot down how do you define your organization? How do you describe it? Push yourself now. I took away the easy words. This is for you. If you're with group people, have a conversation. How do you describe your organization? Because these are all sort of general statements, aren't they? I'm going to wait about 30 seconds. I'll sit quietly here, best I can. Ask you to write it down or share with your colleagues. Go ahead. Okay, hopefully you started jotting some of this down. Your responses, pushing your thinking, expanding your understanding. This might be a good activity to have at a future staff meeting. Don't worry about getting to the right answer. By the way, there's no right answer. I don't have the answer key. The process here is to push your thinking out of your comfort zone. Remember, growth and comfort don't coexist. So when you start to look at your organization through different lenses, I mean, think about how your residents define it. Think about how your stakeholders, how do they describe your organization? When you look at it through the eyes of the people that you're providing services, programs, and impacting their quality of life, I wonder how they would define it. I mean, everybody on this webinar, we're all kind of nerdy about government, aren't we? We're kind of government junkies. But we're not the audience for our message. Think about that for a moment. In your role, you're not the audience for your message. You could really play on that many ways. To your staff, to your colleagues, to your governing body, to your residents, to your business community. I'm not saying you dumb down your message. I'm asking you to calibrate your message. Because the whole part of being a leader is being influential. And if you want to be influential, you have to understand where people are coming from. Meet them on their terms, not always yours. So hopefully you had a little fun with that. And I hope that you continue that. You could, and I just picked 6 words that I thought were the easy ones that I thought if I pull those off the table, it's really going to help people really push their thinking. Remember what I'm trying to do. I'm like your fitness trainer today. So I hope you have on your sneakers and your sweats. I'm trying to help you get in better shape to be both responsive and proactive, to strengthen those muscles that, for whatever reason, may not necessarily be as the quality that you want. Now, this is just a little bit about me. After we're 20 minutes into this, just about who I am. I'm Patrick Ibarra. I'm the founder of the Mejorando Group. We celebrate 19 years in business next month. Mejorando was mentioned in my bio, and wasn't that a wonderful bio Sandy read? You do know I wrote that, so it's all very flattering. Mejorando is a Spanish word that means getting better all the time, sort of the Hispanic version of Kaizen for continuous improvement. I am a former city manager and a recovering HR director. I spent 15 years in the business before I started my practice. I'm based outside of Phoenix, Arizona, in Glendale, where it's supposed to be about 75 today, but we won't talk about the weather. But I have clients all over the country, including a few of my clients who joined us today. And all of our clients are in the public sector, state, federal, primarily city and counties. If you're on LinkedIn, please send me a LinkedIn request. I post on LinkedIn a couple of times a week, and it's not about you. I mean, it's not about me, it's about you. I'm a big believer in iron sharpens iron, so I'm always trying to provide good content. That's just a little bit about me. All right. So what do you think about your organization? I think an area that the public sector has grappled with, gosh, for as long as I can remember, is what does success look like? How do you define that? And no, it's not just about happy residents. And it's not all about happy employees. Happiness is an individual choice that's influenced by many factors other than just cause and effect, what we think we can do. But think about, how do you define success as an agency? And I'm going to share with you, based on my practice the last almost 19 years, what I have found for organizations that are achieving some measure of success, what they are doing intentionally, deliberately, purposefully. One, and these are not in priority order, they're values-based. So again, I go back to, what are your values as an organization? How are you leveraging your values? How are you applying your values? One of my clients is on this webinar, Joe Mazzola from the city of McKinney. I've worked with the city of McKinney in the North Dallas area for several years. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Joe. One of the areas that McKinney is always spending time on is their values, what they are, and more importantly, how they embed them in formal practices: hiring, selection, promotion, learning and development, performance appraisal. So if you don't do that intentionally, the values are just words on a page. So think about their values and how are you refreshing those? How are you applying those? The second one, which is an area that's really been emerging in the last few years, I work with a lot of executive teams. I don't do retreats, I do in advance. And one of the areas we spend a lot of time on is principles. What are your leadership principles? Not just individually, but organizationally. Where can I find your leadership principles? If I join your executive team tomorrow and I say, what do we stand for as an executive team? What would you say? The third one is they're purpose-driven. What's your purpose, which is code for mission? If I join your organization tomorrow and say, hey, I'm so excited to be here, what are we trying to accomplish? What would you say? I think sometimes the simple questions provoke the most challenging responses because it pushes us out of our comfort zone about assumptions that we make. The fourth component is they're performance focused. It's not just the annual or biannual time to do the performance review. They're continually talking about performance. And the fifth one is their healthy culture, which we're going to spend some time on today as well. Think about how strong your culture is. And I would offer to you, you've got to be vigilant about keeping your hand on the thermostat of the culture, because there's people in your organization that want to bring it down. Remember, misery loves company. We'll examine that as well, but how healthy your culture is. So I'm not going to explore these in particular. I just wanted to share with you as we get started today some ways to look at success. Now, I've got a few polling questions, so those of you get ready to respond to this, just to get a sense of who's in there on the webinar with us. So here we go. Sorry about that. Initial polling here. Check the type of organization you represent. Are you with a city, a county, a special district, state, federal, other? Could be maybe a university or a council of government. But if you'd respond to that, there we go. Take a few seconds for this. Looks like we have a lot of city people. There's special district. Another 15 seconds here.
And Patrick, Sandy, I just want to remind everybody that in order to submit their response, they just have to click on the screen in the box next to the answer of their choice.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. Okay, well, let me move on to the next question. So it looks like primarily city. We had a couple of district people there. Keep your hand ready. I'll check. Whoops. I think that's the same as the first one, Sandy. So it was supposed to be the number of people attending the webinar. So we'll move on though, okay? Let me ask you this, participants. Have you RSVP'd your future? How are you building career insurance? How does the approach to innovation, your mindset, your skill set? What's your future look like? I would contend your best days for your career are in front of you, not behind you. And in that regard, you must work on what you do, not just at what you do. You got to work on your career, not just at your job. That's what I'm trying to share with you today. You got to work on your organization, not just at it. And in particular, these are 4 areas of focus I want you to think about for today. And I believe these are 4 segments where you can apply to any time you're in a learning situation. I'm going to go clockwise here. Your focus. At the top, your mindset. Your mind is a muscle. When we stop learning, we stop growing. Not good for any of us. So think about how you're equipping your mindset, how you're lubricating your mind. The second one is skill set. I see this often in my practice. We almost overcorrect on skill set, and there's a neglect of mindset. The third one is, how modern is your approach to building innovation capability in your organization? How modern are your skill sets, your portfolio, your capabilities? And the fourth one is, how are you increasing capacity for yourself and for your organization? So here's a little bit of a brain teaser. What word is that? Well, of course, it's innovation. Not so fast. Let me go back so you can see it. I'm just trying to play a little mind tricks here with you, get you thinking here on a Tuesday. Trying to challenge those assumptions. Now, when we look at innovation, it has to do with new value, not necessarily new things. Think about that for a moment. It has to do with new value, not necessarily new things. I think we all recognize that during these uncertain times, there's sort of this, we tend to think that's when innovation is going to pop, like it's preordained, it's preset, like, hey, we're all hungry, let's try new things. What research often bears out is that when people are most stressed is when we also duck. We bury our heads. We wait till this is over. People are emotionally exhausted. So be careful not to make the assumption, because everything's on the table to evaluate that what's old is not going to be new. You're going to challenge some assumptions. Understand that there's the human behavior component, that sometimes when people are overwhelmed, they're not so receptive to new ideas. In fact, they bury their head in the sand, if you will. But when you look at innovation, let me share with you this. When you look at these businesses, you're all familiar with these. Think about what they're providing. You're all familiar with these, as I said, these businesses. Amazon.com, they're a convenience store. They're the 21st century of the Sears catalog. There's Target in the top left, and Adidas, Starbucks. They invented the pre-purchase card. They made millions of dollars off that. Vans, you can see I have a teenage son, so Vans is popular. Google it, my hometown Kansas City Royals. You're familiar with all these brands. What do they know? They know their target audience. They know very well who they're trying to approach. They understand their business model. They're highly successful, not by accident, but on purpose. Remember, every organization is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. So when you look at these aren't logos. I mean, these are not, these are brands, I should say. not just their logo. It's when you look at these, what does it stand for? At the bottom left of that slide is the Mejorando Group. You know what I want you to think when you see that or hear my name is value. Think about, what do people believe when they see your agency's logo? What's your brand? What's your reputation? I don't know if you noticed, but in the bottom right of the screen, of the slides, is a notebook trying to encourage you to jot down notes, not just today, but always. But when you think about innovation, think about these businesses. Amazon is becoming, I mean, it's amazing how they're sort of rivaling in a secretive, more secretive way what Google has become essentially a sort of an investment firm, and they have a whole arm of where they're trying to invest in emerging technologies. They developed a contact lens that can check your blood sugar. That didn't come from big pharmacy companies. It came from Google seeding that capital. Amazon, always trying to do new things. When you look at innovation and new value, it's not always just new things. It's how are they doing it to make it easier, faster, better. Think about that for your service delivery. Jot down right now, while it's fresh, maybe one or two of your services that you think need attention, that this pandemic has really identified as the service delivery process was broken or brittle. Jot down something that you've just found. I'm not trying to ask you to be critical of the people delivering it, but the process itself. We do realize that when you go back to your government building, some of you have never left, but you're not going back to paper, pencil, fax machines. I mean, if you want to see young people get a chuckle and think that that the traveling Smithsonian exhibit, bust out a fax machine, they're going to say, what world do you live in? So think about how you as an organization are adding new value. And also to look at your mindset. Are you rule-centric or result-centric? What defines your agency? A lot of governments are very rules-focused, very policy-driven. I'm not dismissing the importance of rules and policies and procedures, but policies often doesn't drive innovation. It's purpose and principles. Think about the results you're trying to achieve individually and organizationally. Where does innovation come into that? It's one of the ingredients. It can't be, oh yeah, we have to remember. It should be part and parcel of everything you're trying to accomplish. It has to be this inescapable topic that you're talking about innovation on a regular basis, not just when there's a crisis. And when you look at the role of government, it's to serve as the protagonist for a better quality of life. So in that regard, as the advocate for a better quality of life, I want you to think about what must you do well as an agency to be successful? What do you need to do well? What's nice to do well? Must, need, and nice. I would ask you to think about that after today for your career. What must you do well to be successful? What do you need to do well? What's nice to do well? If you're interested in getting promoted, think about what's that person in that position doing must. I mean, you can use this in so many different ways. But when you start to think about it, and I'm really starting to unpack this here about the role of innovation, when you look at what your agency must do well, and remember, you're not in the business of customer service. We need to drop that from the jargon. You're not in the business of customer service. Customer service is a means to an end. You're a service-centric organization, customer-focused, absolutely. But you're not in the business of customer service. You're in the business of impacting the quality of life of the residents and the communities that you serve. Are you in the outputs or in outcomes? I would offer you're in the outcome business. How are you impacting those outcomes? So as we look at trying to think outside the building, but these are the four drivers of innovation. And this is really the balance of what I'm going to cover in the next 45 to 50 minutes. I'm going to leave about the last 10 minutes for questions. But if you have those, Sandy, maybe you can share with them where they can put them. So when we come to that point, we can just start reading off those questions. I'll do my best to answer that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there is the chat box at the bottom left corner of your screen. So participants, you can put your questions in there at any time. You don't have to wait until the end. Just make sure you click on the send button to submit your question to Patrick.
Thank you. So these are the four drivers of innovation and really the framework for the balance of my remarks. We're going to go through each of these. Language, the vocabulary that you use. The leadership, the role of leaders in advocating. And remember, leadership has less to do with titles and more to do with behavior. And until you see yourself as a leader, ladies and gentlemen, no one else will. I don't care how long you've been with the agency, what your credentials are like, what your age is, what your pedigree. Until you see yourself as a leader, no one else will. So we're going to look at leadership. We're also going to look at your workforce, the employees of your organization. They're as a driver of innovation. And then the culture. So these are the four drivers of innovation that I've worked with clients about and what we've seen to really impact innovation, to be intentional. Because the days of somebody just staring out the window waiting for the $1 million idea, those are over. And if you've ever been on the campus of a high-tech firm like Google, I've had the good fortune of being there a few times, there's no offices. They create gathering places. I'm going to share that with you, especially about your workforce and culture. And they also don't do suggestion boxes. So let's look at, are these innovative nowadays when you think about language? Look at all these. Elvis Presley, jet travel, the TV remote control. I'm the youngest of 8. I thought till I was 8 years old, I was the remote control. Email, Facebook, the internet. Did I say the youngest of 8? I'm the youngest of 4. I didn't want to give my parents any heart palpitations there. Are these innovative? So think about the words that you, Elvis Presley, arrived on the scene, 1955, rock and roll music. People thought he was the devil. He was going to corrupt young people. Rock and roll music was going to corrupt young people. Fortunately, he did. Rock and roll music changed everything. I think I remember my older brother and sisters and the Beatles revolution. Just think about how that changed the world. Jet travel. The railroad industry said, why do people want to get on an airplane? See, the railroad business thought they were in the transportation business. They didn't realize they were in the convenience business. What kind of business are you in? You're not in, don't tell me about the features of your services. Tell me about the benefits of your services. That's where innovation starts to come in. How do you, either small or large, using innovation, impact a better outcome? What business are you in? And again, you're not in the business of customer service. You're in the business of generating outcomes. The TV remote control. I remember growing up in Kansas City, somebody had a remote control. The family that was rich with a big console color TV, the young people in this webinar, here's a phrase you never heard in the 1960s. Let's move the TV set. The thing weighed about 2,000 pounds. Nobody ever moved it. For the one TV we had in our house. But when the remote control came out, people said, why do we need this? Look at all these. People said, why? Think about the language you use in your organization. Public meeting, report, council, board, project. Hey, those are all helpful. They're shorthand, but they also keep new ideas out. Think about the language that you use, how you might want to be able to change that. And I share with this quote for you: resources are no substitute for resourcefulness. It goes back to what I was covering earlier about how you define your organization. I'm really trying to challenge that, redirect you. And when you look at your organization, here's a way to contrast this. This I included in the December issue of Public Management, the 4th article I wrote about We've Always Done It That Way, It's Over, What's Next, about innovating your future. So if you're interested, you can go to my website, download that, or you're obviously you're a member of ICMA, you can access it there. But I included this table to kind of compare and contrast. We've always done it that way. So let's try a different way, from an event to a process. So if it's not broken, it's fine. To break lots of things, to settling for standard answers, to questioning more, asking more questions. That's what I mentioned earlier, from failure to mistake. The suggestion box, my gosh, get rid of those. They don't work. To trafficking in ideas. Remember, innovators traffic in ideas like leaders traffic in trust. From a committee to what's new, what's next. I'll share more about that with you later. From comfort to curiosity, from conformity to creativity, from predictability to progress. These are mindset shifts. From the leaders responsible for new ideas to everyone who's responsible for new ideas. From empowerment as a program to empowerment as a principle. From bureaucrats to pirates. From compliance to commitment. From being risk averse to being risk tolerant. From rules to results. From policies to principles. From best practices to next practices. These are mindset shifts. Think about how you're trying to adopt those and incorporate those in your approach. Jot down right now, while it's fresh in your head, that let's try a different way. Write down which of those really resonate with you that you'd really try to start using, or you are using. Sometimes you just have to act your way to a new way of thinking, not think your way to a new way of acting. Sometimes you just have to act your way to a new way of thinking, not think your way to a new way of acting. So jot some of those down that jumped off the page to you, that you want to just start using, referencing, and pushing yourself, strengthening those muscles. Okay? Let me move forward here. Now let's talk about leadership. These are what leaders' types of behaviors to unlock the door to creativity. Remember, when you're in a leadership role, you're sort of the CEO, if you will. And what I mean by that is you're the chief example officer. You're the chief empowerment officer. You're the chief experience officer. We can go on and on with those E's, but think about what leaders do. People cue on your behavior. I assume many of you have children, or you work with people who act like children. But isn't it weird to see in your kids habits they picked up from us when we know they were watching? Raise your hand if you agree that our kids pick up their bad habits from our spouses. Raise your hand if you agree with that. Realizing I can't see you, raise your hand. But have fun in the room that you're in. And if your spouse is within earshot, just tell them to go out of the room. But these are what leaders do intentionally to push creativity, innovation in the organization's collective mindset. That curiosity, inspiring curiosity. They encourage employees to expand their understanding of different facts. They have different conversations with stakeholders. They challenge assumptions. They push their thinking not only from the future or from the past, they explore into the future. So think about inspired curiosity. What are you doing to really challenge your own assumptions? The next one is challenging current perspectives. They're putting it on the table. Just because we haven't done it doesn't mean we shouldn't at least consider it. Think about the teachers you had in school, wherever you were in school. Maybe you're struggling with science or math or social studies. And our best teachers, regardless of where we were in school, took time out of their schedule. I know many of us would like to go back and say thank you to them. Of course, we saw them at the grocery store, we'd still freak out, especially from elementary school. But they really pushed our thinking. They said, wait, let's work on this with you. Maybe you stayed in from recess, or you came in after class, or you visited them in an office hour. Remember, while all teachers aren't leaders, leaders have to be good teachers. They have to help people from where they are to challenge those current perspectives, not just tell people to work harder, which implies they're not, or work smarter, which implies they're not very bright. I think those phrases go over like a lead balloon for people. People resent that. So how do you, as a leader, as a teacher, challenge current perspectives? Who's the contrarian in your group? And are you encouraging them to sort of challenge those assumptions? The third one is they create some freedom. Freedom within a framework. Think about that. Freedom within framework. They encourage experimentation and risk-taking, learning from mistakes and valuing effort over perfection. And the fourth one is they drive discipline. Discipline. Think about that. They're intentional. They're purposeful. Most people that are successful in the world of innovation are not doing it by accident. Serendipity is not often replicable. So when you think about leaders, they're trying to help, they're advocating, they're encouraging, they're supporting, they're modeling, being intentional as we explore innovation. We're not really sure this is going to take us, but we're challenging questions. We're pushing our thinking. We're putting things on the table, the status quo. And if anything, the last year has shown us is the status quo sometimes loses its status even when people don't realize it, but they still hang on to it. Remember, not everybody's for progress, especially those people who stand to gain the most by maintaining the status quo. So when you look at this next slide, fill it in for me. What's that typical response? Don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. That sounds really good. Let's stop doing that. Because right now in your agency, people are coming across problems. They don't have the answer. So guess what they're not doing? They're not bringing you what the problem is because they don't have an answer. And if you have in the past strongly encouraged employees only to bring you problems when they have a solution, they pick up very clearly, I can't bring him a solution because I can't bring him the problem because I don't have the solution. So now you're touching velvet. You don't want to touch velvet in your role. You don't want to touch things that are homogenized and pasteurized. You want to touch the rawness. So I encourage you to revisit this approach. It sounds really good in theory, but in practice, it doesn't work. Now, I'm not saying you should enable people where they can come in and drop all their problems on your desk and they walk away. Absolutely not. But maybe you should focus on your mission question, not your mission statement. This is all about you asking different questions. And if you start asking different questions without worrying about how fast you have to get to an answer, it really encourages and creates a culture by which people want to spend more time asking questions, not in an impractical, esoteric way, in a thoughtful, pragmatic way. So as we look at your workforce, the third component that drives innovation, do you want commitment or compliance out of your workforce? They're both outcomes. Sometimes you want compliance. Why? You say so. You say so. But if you overrely on compliance, you have a group of employees standing around waiting to be told what to do. I mean, government loves to say, we love to hire creative, clever people, and then they bring them in and say, please now conform. It's easy to demotivate people, ladies and gentlemen. Tell them no a lot. Some people quit and leave. Some people quit and stay. And I'm not saying the people that quit and stay always are apathetic or lazy. Sometimes they just get tired of hitting their head against the wall. I would contend just about everybody in this webinar at some point in their career felt devalued, felt like their point of view was not being respected. Doesn't mean that every idea that you put on the table is going to be implemented. But it shouldn't be overanalyzed. If I bring a new idea to you and I'm criticized or I'm rejected, guess what I stop doing? I stop bringing you new ideas. And those are the managers that think, yeah, my staff is really satisfied because I never hear from them. Maybe they stop bringing things to you because of the way that person reacted. Remember, leaders manage, people want to be led, not managed. You manage projects, programs, services, operations, facilities, infrastructure, technology. You lead people. And even in this virtual world, your open door policy means you leave your office. You got to wander and wonder. So when we look at the workforce, this is the new employer-employee contract. People want productive, engaging, enjoyable work experiences. Right now, in particular, those of you that have a lot of employees working from home, it's really challenging, I think, to maintain healthy relationships with staff. I've been doing a lot of work with clients trying to help them stabilize their culture to make sure it doesn't kind of slide back if it was unhealthy when the pandemic happened. Some of you have not seen coworkers in several months, maybe close to a year. It's hard to sustain that just through Zoom or Teams, what have you. Now everything is scheduled. We don't have those pop-ins. One of the things I'm encouraging leaders to do is have a virtual office hour where you encourage people, hey, I'm going to be online and I'm going to be doing some work. It's the equivalent of your doors open. But remember, your open door policy means you leave your office. So you got to think about how are you fostering an environment where people feel valued. Doesn't mean that everything they say is going to come to fruition. But I ask you, how do your employees feel about where they work? I want to be innovative. Am I encouraged? Because it really stinks to be more ambitious than your boss. People are going to remember how they were treated during this pandemic. And talented people always have options regardless of the economy. So let me dive a little deeper here about your workforce. These are the factors that often are the most influential driving employees' performance. And I would offer the one that what I found in my practice, that tends to have the most influence is in the upper left, attitude. Because attitude drives behavior, which creates choices for people. So think of the attitude that you need in your organization. Where is innovation as a mindset? So let me share with you a particular example about how you can start sort of filtering through. Because I would offer you, you're not going to change someone's attitude. You can change someone's skill set if they have the desire to learn. But people walk into your workforce, they're pretty much baked. Most people aren't arriving at work saying, yeah, I really want to change. And as I say, it's challenging if you think that you're going to be a crusader and and totally influence someone. We affect other people, and we are affected by other people. We'll get into that in just a few moments about culture. So I'm just asking you to revisit the criteria by which people are succeeding in your organization. Think about successful employees, because what's the reward for good work? More work. What's often the reward for poor work? Less work. Some of you right now, you're not worried about members of your staff. They're getting stuff done right now, but then there's other people that are challenging you. So you think about your workforce. There's rock stars, rock solid, and rocks. I wrote a piece for ICMA in 2019 about how to better leverage your rock stars if you're interested. Finding that, or visit my site, you can find it, gettingbetterallthetime.com. We love rock stars. They're knocking it out of the park every day, generating their share of hits. They're the ones that the reward for good work is more work. My sense is that I think you don't have to raise your hand, but we tend to take advantage of rock stars. I hope that you're acknowledging them, especially right now, praising them, supporting them, and asking them one question: what more can I do to help you be successful? And then there's rock solid. These are the people that are ambivalent. Is the best days for their organization in front of you? Because who's bending their ears are the rocks. And ROCKS is an acronym for resisting the opportunity to challenge your knowledge and skills. These are the ones that love an audience. So they're talking to the rock solid all the time. And I'm just challenging you here that according to Pareto's rule, don't spend 80% of your time with 20% of the people that are rocks. Because I don't think you're going to convert them. They think they're going to change your mind. So again, I go back to how are you, look at your interview questions. Look at your promotional interview questions. If you've got somebody that's up for a promotion and they've never demonstrated innovation, curiosity, creativity, or imagination, do you really think that once you promote them, they're going to unleash productivity on you? Think about how you're factoring innovation into the collective mindset of hiring, selecting, promoting, learning and development, and performance appraisals. Because you can't just flip a switch and say, let's now be creative. Some people, that's just not a natural instinct for them. And I would offer to you that it's attitudinal based. Being innovative is attitudinal. It's not just a skill. If people have the appropriate attitude, you can definitely equip them with skills to be innovative on purpose. But if they don't have an appetite, if people walk in the door and they're full, you can't make people eat when they're not hungry. So when you look at your culture, it's important to have creative, collaborative conversations to foster a culture of innovation. Think about the content of your conversations. If you're my manager and all we talk about are services, operations, and programs, the SOP, then what am I going to go do? I'm going to focus on services, operations, and programs. I'm not dismissing that. I'm just asking you to think about the content of your conversation, because conversations are the oxygen of priorities. Let me repeat that. Conversations are the oxygen of priorities. So whatever you're talking about, your staff views as important. If you're only talking about performance once a year, they know it's an event-based conversation. If you only talk about customer service when there's a crisis, they know it's an event-based conversation. I'll guarantee you the last conversation you had with your manager, your supervisor, after that was over, you went and worked on that, what you just talked about with him or her. And conversely, with your staff, whatever you talked with him or her about, your staff member, they went and worked on what you just talked about. So I'm asking you to think about what kind of conversations are happening with your staff, among your peers. Think about your staff meetings. What are people talking about? When is it put on the table about what can we do to be more innovative on purpose? And people look at you and go, did you just go to a webinar or something? But somewhere, you got to be the change that you want to be. Put it on the table. We love talking about collaboration. It's one of the biggest buzzwords I hear across the country along with transparency. Collaboration requires patience and empathy. It requires the willingness to listen if you're really going to collaborate. So I'm just asking you to think about the content of your conversations. And when you look at culture, these are the 6 key attributes of a healthy culture. Purpose and mission, the top there, going at 12 o'clock. I think I'm going to do some writing later this year and maybe do a webinar on culture, because I'm finding in my practice in the last few years, and definitely what I'm hearing from a lot of clients, is they're really trying to examine more closely the anatomy of their workplace culture, because there's drivers of their culture and there's barriers of their culture. So think about, first and foremost, the purpose, the mission. When that is first and foremost in the minds of your employees, if I'm a maintenance worker sitting on a mower, do I understand the mission of this agency? Do I understand my role and responsibility in driving innovation to help us be more effective? Yeah, while it might not be in my job description, I bring that to the table every day. Do I understand the mission? How about the second component, going clockwise there, opportunity? Do people in the organization have an opportunity to learn and grow? And I don't mean learn always by attending training, but I mean about having engaging conversations with their manager, with their colleagues. The third one, how are you celebrating success? What does success mean in your agency? What are you bringing to your staff? And not just the generalities where, we're working hard. Okay, what else? How about the impact you're having? When's the last time you got a really nice note from a resident about some service that your employees delivered, and you went out and celebrated that with your employees? Maybe you had a virtual pizza party. Or you did something, people bond over food. I know people miss these last year's holiday parties. That's because that's a time where they have tradition and heritage and legacy. It gives them a sense of fulfillment, of camaraderie, of fellowship. I'm hoping that we can get back to that, go to that next normal, and this year you can have some of those celebrations. And I have the registration list here, so I'm expected to get invited to a lot of potlucks around Halloween and Thanksgiving and Christmas. And you can depend on me for ice. I'm really good at bringing ice, so put me down for ice. I'm just kidding around. The next component is treatment or well-being. If anything, this pandemic has revealed the importance of mental health. How are people being treated in your organization? The fifth one is hiring for fit. What does it mean to be a successful employee in your agency? I've invested a lot of time with clients helping them craft a better definition of what it means for fit. It does not mean people like you. It means people that are like-minded. None of us are easy to live with. Right now, let me just tell you, none of you are easy to live with. I'm not easy to live with. People that think they're easy to live with are the same people who love giving parenting advice because they have a dog. It's not the same thing at all. So hiring for fit. Remember, whatever you tolerate, you advocate. So when you look around your organization, if innovation is always an afterthought and it's not mission critical, if I do really well, but innovation isn't part and parcel about what I'm accomplishing, maybe it's time to revisit the criteria. And the final part is credibility of leaders. Remember, leaders traffic and trust. And when we look at culture, people cue on their leaders. If you're my manager, we're talking about innovation on a regular basis, about what I can bring to the table. If you're encouraging me to bring problems so we can have conversations. My gosh. Now I'm responsible. As I say, no one washes a rental car. Many of you have heard me say that a million times. The reason I say that is because people don't wash a rental car because they don't own it. There are some people who treat their career like a rental car, their marriage, their life. They're always spectators. That way, when things don't go well, they're not accountable. So you want people to have a sense of ownership for the performance of your organization. They want to have a sense of ownership. People own their own career, their own morale, their own attitude. Think about that credibility. Leaders traffic and trust. How are you building healthy partnerships with your colleagues that go back to that content of your conversations, healthy partnerships with members of your staff? So let me ask you this to write down, another chance for you to jot some things down. Write down, what will your organization need to change to be highly successful in the future? What will your citizens and customers require of you? What will your employees require of you? I'm going to take about 90 seconds, so I'm going to pause. Jot this down. There's no right answer to this. I'm trying to just push your thinking, as I've been trying to do all throughout this webinar. So jot those down. And if you're in a group, have a conversation. About 90 seconds. About another 45 seconds. Okay. Hopefully you got a good head start there. I encourage you to go back, hopefully in your ideas notebook that you're keeping, go back to these questions at a time when you can really not race through it, but you get a chance to reflect. Capture your thoughts. Maybe have a conversation with your colleagues at a future staff meeting with people on your staff. Impromptu. Challenging age-old assumptions. So hopefully some cool stuff popped from that conversation. Now, sometimes the challenge in government at all levels is this idea: lather, rinse, repeat. You may recall this phrase. It came out in the 1960s, I believe. Procter & Gamble put this on the back of shampoo bottles as a way to market, as a way to sell more shampoo. There's no scientific evidence that repeating washing your hair has anything to do with making it cleaner. It was a marketing gimmick. People bought into it lock, stock, and barrel. I remember as a little boy, my mother sprayed on the back of that shampoo bottle, Johnson's baby shampoo. I was a little boy. I guess I got to do it again. People just did it by default. It's kind of silly now that we think about it, but government sometimes does that. They want to build the future by using the past solutions. That's where innovation often gets choked. It gets suppressed. So how do you start to cultivate? How do you start to create? Well, I would offer you, as I mentioned, innovators traffic and ideas. Well, how do they do that? How do you amplify human imagination? So we're going to do two things. I hope that you have a pencil and paper handy. I'm going to ask you to do something for me. Draw a circle with 4 squares, and in it, like 4 pieces of pie. Divide it into 4. Okay? Even if it's scratch paper, whatever, right? A circle, divided into 4 equal parts. In the top right, write in that pie slice, strategy. Going clockwise, the second slice, write the word structure. That's like your org chart. The third pie slice, write service delivery. So we've got strategy in the top right, structure in the bottom right, service delivery in the bottom left, and the upper left, write talent management practices. Talent management practices. At the top of that circle, draw like a big parentheses around it, just the top, and at the top of that parentheses, write the word leadership. Do the same at the bottom of that circle, draw big parentheses kind of around it, the circle, and write the word culture. Now, somewhere else on that same paper, write down 3 words, not in order, but one, and then on the next line, the next one, and the next line, the next word. These 3 words: inputs, the next line down, outputs, and the line after that, outcomes. So to recap, in case you were scrambling to get a pencil or paper, there was a circle, a pie chart divided into 4, 1 pie slice with strategy, 1 with structure, which is code for org chart, the third one with service delivery, The fourth one was talent management practices. At the top, with the parentheses, was leadership. The bottom was culture. Then there was 3 words on a separate segment of your paper: inputs, outputs, and outcomes. This is the where of innovation. Okay, you might want to write that down somewhere. The where of innovation. We're focusing on the what and the how. It's important as you look at your organization, where does innovation need to happen? This starts to give you some kind of, not criteria, but it's the menu when you start to think about what needs to be changed. And I would go so far as to say, where in the organization does innovation need to happen? So when you look at your strategy, does your strategy need to be refined? Does it need to be refreshed? Not just the strategic plan for your governing body, but also what's the strategy for departments? Is that an area where innovation, not by itself, but is that where innovation can start to examine the past to build the future? Remember, innovation is a mindset, it's a verb. So it's not that you're going to put the word innovation in your strategy, it's that you're using innovation as a way to explore your strategy. The second component, your structure. Innovation, how can you redeploy resources? And remember, let's all acknowledge that the organization chart does not define how work gets done. The organization chart is intended to deploy resources. When I'm often asked to come in and do a restructuring, the first question I ask them is, what do you want to do differently? They're often not sure, so we have to spend time in their strategy. Remember, form follows function, so structure follows strategy. The third component is service delivery. This is ripe for innovation, not just about being cool and being trendy, but when you start to think about your portfolio of services, how modern is that portfolio? Government does a lot of things well. One of the things not do well is stop doing things. Which services do you believe need attention? And there's no sense making some service more efficient that you shouldn't be doing in the first place. Government, what point have things expired? And it's not about the people doing it, okay? I'm not talking about the employees. But at what point does the portfolio need to be modernized? And here's an acronym you might want to write down, EAR. How easy, accessible, and reliable are your services? How easy, accessible, and reliable are your services? Especially from the vantage point of your customers, dare I say your consumer. I would think that the service delivery is an area ripe for you to apply innovation as a mindset to revisit how you've been doing it, what needs to change, and not just, one of the areas I meant to mention, there is way too much emphasis in the world of government today to think somehow innovation is akin to adopting new technology. That is not. Don't over-rely on your IT department. Sometimes they're not well equipped. Buying new software does not necessarily mean that it's innovative. It means you bought a new piece of software. If anything, we need to start challenging that assumption more intentionally, because I see a lot of people assuming that innovation is synonymous with technology. I would challenge that all day long. Think about that in your own organization. If you've not sort of drifted into that, to think that's the only place where it should come from is IT. Sometimes the people in that department are not equipped. Their mindset, they're more technology driven. They're not really results driven, or they don't have an innovative mindset. They're trying to buy a solution. I'm not trying to dismiss their importance, but let's not over-rely. The fourth one is your talent management practices. HR in your agency does not own those exclusively. How modern are your talent management practices? And if you've heard me before at conferences or webinars, one of my favorite expressions is, in order to build a modern workforce, you need a modern approach. If I ask you when that policy was adopted, and your response to me is 1990 or 1980, maybe it's time that you revise your policies. Remember, you're an employer. Think about that mindset, that interview. Here's a good question to ask somebody in an interview. What did you learn last year? And you might say, well, what am I looking for? You're looking to see if they own their own learning, because learning and innovation are part of the same ecosystem. Would you rather have somebody coming in that's wet clay than a clay pot? Somebody that sees themselves, that takes ownership for their own learning? It doesn't really matter what that candidate learned last year. Maybe he learned how to change the oil in his truck, or she learned how to do French cooking. Who does it really matter? Don't focus on what they learned. Focus on the approach. Innovation is a verb. They took responsibility for their own innovation. If you hear from a candidate, internal or external, that when you ask them that question and their response is, I didn't learn anything last year, if you really think that somehow that person is going to come in after you promote them or hire them, and they're going to bring the mindset you need to be innovative, I would suggest that you think again. That goes back to that attitudinal. You can start to make linkages here, patterns. And I'm trying to re-engineer the pattern or re-engineer it and then engineer it differently. Remember, as a lead, government is about social engineering. And your role as a leader, as a manager, is to be a performance engineer. And I would ask you to put on the table, Where does innovation as part of attitude come into the mindset as being mission critical criteria for attracting and developing talent? And then as we've talked about the whole notion of leadership at the top and culture at the bottom, you can reverse their places, it doesn't really matter. That creates, when we talk about how do you amplify human imagination, I think sometimes it's easier to recruit change than it is recreate it. Remember, change, innovation, and progress are all part of the same ecosystem. They're all inextricably linked. And in order to be innovative, you've got to use people's imagination, which means they have to be creative, which means they have to be curious. So if you're curious, you're creative, you're using your imagination to be innovative. If you're curious, you're creative, then you can use your imagination to be innovative. That is part of a methodology. I don't think it's a reach for me to say that. I'm just sort of bundling that in a way that helps you, I hope. If you're curious, you're creative, which means you're using your imagination and now can be innovative. Innovation is an outcome. You can't just will it to happen if people aren't challenging assumptions. People come in every day and they're already cooked. They're baked in. They're not pushing their thinking. Then think of the environment. And right now is, I think, particularly challenging. People are hunkered down. They're exhausted. I'm good. I don't need to try to do anything more. So be careful that you don't assume that people are ready to do more innovative things. So we've been together about an hour so far. Write down at least 2 things you've learned so far today. From what maybe something I've shared, maybe it's from something that just occurred to you, listening to your colleagues in the room. But 2 things that you've learned so far today. Maybe it hits you in the head, hits you in the heart, hits you in the gut. Okay. All right, we've got about 15 minutes left, so let me just keep moving here. These are different idea generator strategies, and these were included in the December 2020 issue of Public Management, in which I had the article, what we've always done it that way is over, what's next, and this was part 4, Innovating Your Future. So please feel free to download that article or grab it if you have it there somewhere in your office, and I explain these idea generator strategies. And in particular, 2 of these that I think really have a lot of relevance right now is the top left, that virtual idea lounge, where you can just encourage people to join together and have conversations impromptu and talk about, maybe you follow up from today's webinar, maybe, and you're going to have these PowerPoint slides, feel free to reuse them, repurpose them, and create a conversation. Just say, we're just going to have a conversation for 30 minutes. What we're trying to solve. We're not trying to solve anything. We don't have a solution looking for a problem. What we have is we're trying to equip our workforce with an approach, with an apparatus, with a device where we can examine some of our own assumptions. And then the one in the middle there, renaming your conference rooms. I mean, nobody's excited, but let's go to which conference room we have in the meeting. On the 3rd floor, conference room A. Woo! That's exciting, very inspiring. What if you name that conference room the Sinatra room? Or the Martin Scorsese room? I know this is kind of silly, but I think those of you that know me, I can be a little bit crazy out there. I'm trying to stretch your imagination. Wouldn't it be a lot more exciting going to this Frank Sinatra conference room, or, pick your favorite artist. The artists, the arts, they challenge our assumptions. And there's artwork on the walls, or maybe you're playing some music from Sinatra. Pick your favorite artist. It doesn't really matter. It means when you go into that room, it's just conducive. It's inspiring to reflect on the unknown. When you look at your desk, why do you surround yourself with music or personal effects? Because we draw emotional energy from that. It strengthens us. It soothes us. It's a way we cope with stress. It inspires us sometimes. Pictures do that. Words do that. Music does that. And think about it in your workplace. Now people go, and I always was the approach that if you don't have a policy that says that you can, I guess that means you can. Don't adopt a policy. We shall rename all the conference room. Oh my God, now you've killed the energy behind it. So whatever you want to do. These, and again, you can read more about these, including that virtual field trips. A lot of fun things in there I put. And it's not about being frivolous. It's about challenging people's thoughts, their processes, getting people to sort of think about the unknown. Remember, what made you successful in the past may not help you survive and thrive in the future. That's both exciting and liberating and a little scary. What I'm trying to do today is augment your capabilities, to strengthen your capabilities, to build on what you already know. Maybe ask you to revisit some of that. So I start to round towards the end. This is the preview that you get, because you're special people. You get an early preview of the Innovation Fitness Plan that will be published in the April issue of Public Management. In fact, I just finalized the edits last night for the editor of Public Management. So this is a preview. And let me just share this with you. I know what, I'm really good at joining the gym. I don't know about you, but I'm really good at joining, sometimes driving by the gym. But this is about how, if you want to be innovative on purpose, this is what you can do. And I'm just going to give you the highlights. Look forward in the April issue. Your fitness plan. I'm going to go 1 through 9. 1, you got to lace up your sneakers. You got to look outside government for ideas. The idea that the public sector has nothing to learn from the private sector or the nonprofit is ridiculous. Focus on aggregating good ideas regardless of the sector or the source. The second component, take along a friend in your workout routine. Of course, it's social distancing. Maybe you can invite peers when it's acceptable from another agency just to spend time with you in your workplace. Maybe just have a staff meeting with some of your colleagues in another jurisdiction and say, how are they handling COVID? Or let's not talk about anything related to COVID. Invite them in on a Zoom meeting. Have a conversation when you can get back to the physical workplace. Take it out to the field departments. Share employees with other agencies. Again, giving people the challenge. You might be amazed what you discover about your organization and others that will stretch your mind. The third component is have a plan, but seek out organic opportunities. Some people are list makers like me, so we have to plan spontaneity. Think about what you could do just to put yourself in different places. Be careful not to be so rule-centric, regulations, because I know none of us, including me, we don't have control issues. None of us have that, not at all. Well, having a list is about being, kind of a stress-controlled, controlling, I can't even talk. It's a way that we cope with stress, there I said. So think about how you can be more organic. Try new things. You still have to date your career, right? If you and your career turn into old married couple wearing matching members-only jackets, that's probably not a good thing. Number 4, work on your abs. Maybe you have a virtual idea wall, or maybe physically in the workplace an idea wall where people can scribble their ideas about what we can do to be more innovative. How can we streamline our processes? What are we doing that makes us think we're innovative? Let people jot things down, record it. Again, have good conversations. Number 5, take a run. Maybe you take a virtual field trip. You can do that now to a local art museum, or go to the Louvre. You can do that virtually. All kinds of stuff. But get people out. Get them thinking differently about the world. Get them, and inevitably bring them back to the workplace. Bring them back through a different lens. Number 6, work on your back. Requires a lot of heavy lifting to be an innovator, doesn't it? So maybe you invite some guest speakers in, or maybe you queue up a TED Talk at your next staff meeting, just to keep pushing. Remember, iron sharpens iron. Maybe you're bringing in a speaker about what's the latest economic trends. Does it really matter what the topic is? I would contend, no, it doesn't. It's that you're continually challenging people's, as you've heard me say a billion times today, their assumptions. Put that on the table. Number 7, stay hydrated. Got to make sure that you don't get overwhelmed. If you're interested in having some really cool, thought-provoking materials, books, websites, and magazines and websites, and content, email me, patrick@gettingbetterallthetime.com, and I'll share with you some resources that strengthen your ability to be a flame starter, because people are either a flame starter or a flamethrower. So I'll be glad to share that. And if any of you have come across really cool stuff, post it on LinkedIn. Pardon me, or send it to me. I'll be glad to post it. Think about convening your executive team for an advance, not a retreat. How to help keep them sharp. Maybe think about bringing some employees to attend the recording of this webinar and use it as a prompt. Stop periodically and have good conversations. And then number 8, cool down. Start to kind of, it's time to cool down. You don't want to get overheated. You're trying to have a good fountain of ideas. Now you start to really analyze some of these ideas. You want to put some of these ideas in place. Think about how to pilot it. Try something new. Time to do things different and do different things. And number 9, do it again. One time to the gym doesn't get you in better shape. Oh, shucks, I know we're all disappointed. And doing just, a sequence of all this one time doesn't necessarily equip your organization with the innovative mindset that it needs to stay strong, to stay focused. So I moved through that quickly again. Look for that in the April issue of Public Management. There's more detail there about your innovation fitness plan. So let me start to round the bend here with just a little bit more information. Here's another polling question. How likely are you now to move faster to what's next? We've joined the gym and now have a better fitness plan so we can start going more often. Second one, we've joined the gym but still want to drive by for a while before going in. Or the third one, what's a gym? So just click on that, as Sandy shared with you on your screen. Respond to that question. Any responses? I equipped you. There we go. All right. Think about it. Have some fun. Couple more seconds. Okay, I'm going to move on. Couple final slides, and I want to address one final point, and then open it up for questions. So this is a quote I developed: "Stop tightening your belts and instead change your pants." You've all heard that phrase from elected officials many times. We got to tighten our belt. We got to tighten our belt. You probably just roll your eyes when you hear it. I think sometimes you need to change your pants. You cannot tighten your belt to prosperity. You can lose weight, but not always be healthier. Right? Organizations do it all the time. They can drop a budget. Doesn't mean they're any healthier. People go to they lose weight. Doesn't mean they're healthier as an individual. Sometimes you have to change your approach, and that's where innovation comes in, back to that mindset. So here, let me start to wrap up here with what I call affectionately Patrickisms. I mentioned some of these through the session today, but these are what I find when I speak at conferences or present webinars or do training, leadership training, any sort of platform I'm in. When I share these in that session, people always, there's the ones that people come up to me afterwards and say, "What was that one again? What did you say about that?" So these are sort of the highlight reel of the Patrickisms that you might find to be helpful in your approach to being more successful than you are right now in your journey to get better all the time. First one I mentioned, every organization is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. You can even fill in the person. So if you want to change the outcome, change the approach. The second one, the future is run and won by those who are willing to think differently. The third one, change before you have to instead of because you have to. The fourth one, be successful by choice, not by chance. The fifth one, because serendipity is not replicable. The fifth one, better to be prepared for a future that doesn't happen than not for one that does. The sixth one, distinguish between problems you can fix and issues you can only address. The seventh one, identify roots and anchors. Roots are those traditions, the legacy we draw emotional energy from. They propel us to the future. Anchors hold us back. And this has a lot to do with mindset. If you really examine the roots and anchors in your organization, I think it will be very revealing about what you discover when you start to look at the roots, the traditions, the legacy, the sources of emotional energy that people rely on to move you forward, like their values and the organization site, and anchors, things that hold you back, which are not just people, it's really their mindset. Number 8, leadership is about poetry and plumbing. Number 9, your open door policy means you leave your office. Number 10, good leaders wander and wonder. Number 11, strengthen your versatility to be both responsive and proactive. And 12, best days for your career are in front of you. So let me share with you a little bit about what tools I think you might need on the journey, going from top left to right. One, you might want to have a spark plug. I have one right here in my office that I use as a symbol for energy. Think about the spark plug. It sort of ignites things. That's what it does all the time. What's the spark plug? Are you the spark plug? Is that your role in the organization? You're sort of the human, the Energizer Bunny. Remember those commercials? But what's the spark plug? Going left to right. The second one is the compass. It's important. I collect compasses, by the way. I have them from all over the world. Family members will send them to me someplace they go. Friends will send them to me. My wife buys me all sorts of compasses. I collect clocks and compasses. I've got some really cool ones too. This is fascinating. I love compasses about direction. Think about the compass you have, literally, figuratively. Where are you going? How are you trying to navigate the future? The old saying, if you don't know where you're going, you're sure to get there. To quote Alice in Wonderland. The third one, top right, is your binoculars. I mentioned that earlier, the lenses that you're using. What lenses are you using after today? I hope that you found that you can use all types of lenses, not just binoculars or a microscope, but you need a good set of binoculars to move forward. And the bottom right is the flashlight. Sometimes you're navigating in the dark. It's important to have a flashlight. I share with my clients that I'm a flashlight and a mirror, as I mentioned earlier. The bottom in the middle, there's a sailboat. You're not in a motorboat, ladies and gentlemen. You got to find it, get the wind behind the sails, the prevailing winds, not just in order to move in that direction, but in order to find your path. And the bottom left is the kaleidoscope, which I think is an area that's often undervalued in organizations today. Patrick, we were trying to be practical. Absolutely, you have to be practical. I think you can be practical and imaginative simultaneously. Those are not opposites. Your practical imagination, think about that. A kaleidoscope, how you look at the world. Innovation is part of that you value sort of undetermined outcomes, that you're challenging old notions. You got to think outside the building. You got to think outside your own self. I think what we're going to see going forward, and what I hope that you find from your notes today, is you start to think in new boxes. So it's not just think outside the box. It's adopting new boxes in how you look at it, because now you're looking at it through different lenses. So here's a challenge for you. Little brain teasers to wrap up, and I do have one final point. Imagine these are toothpicks. Okay, imagine these are toothpicks. This equation is not correct. Move as few toothpicks as you can, or that you have to make this equation correct. These are toothpicks. Rearrange the toothpicks to make sure, or to ensure that the equation is correct. I'll just sit here and play the music from Jeopardy. Not a very good rendition. I bet many of you said one. Raise your hand if you said one. Remembering I can't see you. How about two? How many of you said zero? Now write this equation down, but turn it upside down. So it goes x equals ix plus I. Then it's correct. Turn the equation upside down, and it's correct. Somebody in your webinar group just said, I told you so. Other people are saying, how big are those two things? So remember, pressure is a privilege. You've worked your entire career to be right here, right now, ladies and gentlemen. Public service is a noble profession. People ask me what I miss. I've been out of government over 20 years. I miss working alongside cool people like you. I used to love coming in every day, feeling as though that what I was doing mattered, that I had meaning, that I had impact. Every day, every day, each one of you and your coworkers are building a community. You're trying to instill that into your residents and your stakeholders that democracy works. It's just a little messy. I miss some of that. I'm fortunate I get to go to a lot of cool places, work around some pretty neat people that are really committed. And every day, that's what I try to do in all the different platforms that I'm in, is trying to remind people that public service is a noble profession and that pressure is a privilege. Something I wanted to mention, too, about the role of elected officials. I know some of you have elected officials that are not necessarily advocates for experimentation. I get that. And I know that that can be sort of daunting. I would say that what you're trying to do inside the agency is look for opportunities back to that where, that strategy, services, structure, and talent management, where in that framework can you really examine and use innovation to fix that, to address that, to improve that. Some of that does not always rise to the level of what your governing body is going to be aware of. I'm not saying you don't tell them, I just wouldn't broadcast it. Because as soon as you broadcast things to the governing body and it doesn't go well, and they don't respond like you'd like, it can really choke innovation as a mindset, as an approach inside your organization. Because none of you or members of your staff want to present something to your governing body and get lit up on public, on camera. So think about other areas that may not rise to that level of politics with a capital P. Maybe it's a lowercase p. And then finally, just a little bit about my firm. We are an organizational effective consulting practice. I'm a sole proprietor. I bring talent around projects. We partner with leaders to implement solutions that improve organizational performance, provide expertise in culture change, succession planning, talent management, staffing analysis, strategic planning, pardon me, facilitation. I'm doing a lot of work right now with elected officials because I'm a lion tamer, but I'm not a magician. And I do a lot of leadership and management skills training, including converting my entire catalog of 25 workshops to 2-hour formats to present in a virtual environment. I'm on LinkedIn, as I mentioned. I have a newsletter that if you visit our website, Getting Better All the Time, you can download. And I want to say thank you for taking time out of your schedule today to spend some time with me. And I hope that you're taking away some pretty cool stuff, helping sharpen your capabilities to be innovative on purpose. So now I'm going to go to Sandy and see what questions are in the queue. And if for some reason we didn't get a question, please feel free, pardon me, to email me, patrick@gettingbetterallthetime.com, and we can have a conversation about what your question is. Maybe we can schedule a phone call. I'll be glad to do my best to try to help you navigate the future with what that question might be. So, okay? So, Sandy?
Okay. Thanks so much, Patrick. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
So I did just want to remind our participants to submit a question. You can just type that into the chat area in the lower left corner of your screen, and then do be sure to click on the send button. And please note that your question is not viewable to any of the other attendees. So Patrick, we had a question come in that says, has to do with the times that we're in now with COVID. Gathering places without offices have become a point of concern due to COVID. How do you recommend addressing a balance between those concerns and a place to create innovation?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. You know, there's no one way to answer that. I think it's trying to find that balance between engaging people in a conversation online in real time, maybe in a Zoom or a Teams, and say, you know, trying to explore some of that unknown, Sometimes it's having it recorded maybe in a written form where people continually add ideas, where they can share them in a virtual or on a recorded document that's shared by employees. Sometimes if you're physically in the workplace, it's trying to have just at a staff meeting to incorporate it. I would encourage the person that asked that question, think about all the different platforms you have. There's no perfect answer to the balance. I think it's trying to be intentional about putting it in place so where it shows that you're prioritizing it, that innovation is sort of this area that we want to spend more time on. Some people aren't going to like it. They'll shrug their shoulders, but that they think that somehow they're waiting for you to fix it for them, or don't you have the answer key? But if you really want to try to reset the culture around that you're expecting people to bring to the table, then start to create more of an environment. One area I did miss, and I apologize, is that I would not include this. And I think somebody asked this question, so thank you. I did not include this in my remarks. So about performance appraisals, I really struggle about putting it in there because this is what happens the night before the performance appraisals do. I'm your manager, and I ask you, what'd you do last year that was innovative? Well, let's just look at what we put in last year. We put in what we said last year, and then it's check the box. And then if there's no accountability for me just saying the same thing 2 or 3 or 4 years in a row, then innovation has sort of lost its impact. Now it's just something else to do. So I think that's the delicate dance that you have about how do you make innovation a priority without sort of kind of over-bureaucratizing it by putting it in a formal in the performance appraisal document. So, and let me just see. Other questions? I would say, usually if somebody asks this, one of the questions is, where do I get started? And I would say that you're starting. You're here. You've already started, right? You're already moving in that direction. I would say go back over your notes go back over your notes. What jumped out at you? Capture that in your ideas notebook and start to think, okay, where in the organization can I start to inject some innovation into our conversations? How can I have a conversation with my staff or my colleagues or my manager? There's not going to be any perfect time, but take the highlight reel, which I hope that you have one from today's session, and start to figure out how to incorporate that into your conversations. And again, I'll be glad to be a resource as you have that conversation. That was another question. And let's see. There's so many questions coming in. I'm just trying to sort through them. Oh, the role about talent management. Oh, let's see. There's another question. Let me just talk about talent management. I would say that some of you are from agencies where you don't have a formal HR department. I get that. And so what I would say is when you look at talent management, let's not look at it through the keyhole of HR only as a department. Because human resources is a function more than it is just a department. So when I talk about talent management, and I've written extensively about that, so you can visit my website and download articles that I've written for ICMA, really think about your approach. How modern is your approach to attracting, developing talent? And where does innovation come into that as a point of emphasis, as criteria by which you're making selections? So I would ask you to think about that. Your interview questions, I was down in the mechanics of your interview questions. Look at your job announcements. I didn't really get into that. I've covered that previously in other webinars. But, what have you said in your job announcement? We're looking for innovative mindset people who choose every day to build a better community, as opposed to putting in a job announcement, a bunch of tasks. Never again, the rest of your career, should you ever make a job description, a job announcement. They're boring and they attract boring people. If you want people that are going to bring something to the table every day, and innovative and creative and clever, then position the ad with some oomph, some sizzle in that message. You'll attract a different caliber of talent. Now you have to make sure that you bring them in, that they're going to be unleashed and given some space to room to roam. Don't bring them in and say, now please now conform. So just think about all those different ways that you're kind of interacting with prospective candidates, with the public, with your policymakers, with your staff. And where does innovation come in there? Just as it's not so much that you're saying the word, but that you're symbolizing it by the practices that you approach. I try to, I'm an architect of innovation, as my bio says, as I wrote in the bio, but it's more than just words. I try to demonstrate it by my actions, by the advice, by the counsel, by the material, not just because I said so. Right? We all know that. We can't just say it. We got to do something about it. So I think we're just about out of time. There was a question. General tips. I can't read that whole question.
General tips for identifying rock stars during the interview process.
Yeah, I think thank you. Sorry, Sandy. I think interviewing rock stars, you think about how do I look for people that are going to bring something to the table? I think you've got to think about questions you're asking them. What did you learn last year? What do you see as our biggest challenges? What's been your biggest success? What's been the biggest area that you've not succeeded in? So it's not your failure. When you start asking them questions that you think are linked to the type of attitude that you want in your agency. Hiring is like dating. You get what you look for. Never marry the bad date. Never marry the bad hire. So really, better to have a vacancy for the right reason than an incumbent for the wrong one. So I really encourage you to look at the job announcement, the interview questions, including for promotional questions. I often find the promotional process is way too customized. If I ask a police department or a community development director, which I have, describe for me the promotional process, it's often in their heads, which makes it really difficult if I want to climb the ladder about what is it I have to learn. There should be at least some sort of roadmap without a guarantee. If I want to climb the ladder or the lattice, what's my process? We're out of time now, but again, I want to say thank you, everyone, so much. I hope you and your families continue to stay healthy. You're going to get an evaluation about this webinar. I already filled it out for you. I was fabulous. Anyway, but please take time to fill that out, offer comments, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to have the opportunity to talk with you about how it can be a resource to you and your organization to help you in the spirit of the journey of Mayor Hondo to get better all the time. Thank you so much. I will be presenting another webinar May 5th. Julian, and we just finalized that. It will be every employee as a chief experience officer. And it's all about not customer service. It's all going to be about consumer experience. Thank you so much. I'll hand it back to Sandy.
Okay, fantastic, Patrick. Special thank you to Patrick and, of course, to everybody who joined us today. Please do take a moment now to complete that brief evaluation of today's program by clicking on the evaluation link on the left side of your screen. Your comments and suggestions are important to us as we plan future events. The survey must be completed in order to receive a certificate for this program, and you can also access the survey from your ICMA University dashboard by clicking on the program title once you are logged in. Thank you for your participation in today's webinar. We hope you will join us again soon. Today's program is copyright 2021 by the International City County Management Association with all rights reserved. This concludes today's program. You may now disconnect.